Vast crowd of people.
Hello, everybody. Luckily, I didn't particularly promote this online. I mean, if people subscribe to the channel, they would have got it, but I didn't do anything social. So I'm not expecting a vast crowd of people. I'm recording it for the session, the main session. Oh, we've got a comment already. Bloody hell. Hello, Mohammed.
Why aren't you on?
You don't want to join us online, Mohammed?
I was about to say, why is he not on?
Why is he not online? Because he's at work and he's listening to us or something.
He may be working. So, Mohammed, we're gonna need lots of interaction from you. You may be our only audience member. So let me welcome both of you, Douglas, all the way from the colony of Canada.
Yes, we're the colony.
And Thomas, all the way from the colony of Australia. Ex-colonies, of course, now rightfully independent, although still, of course, swearing loyalty to our King, Charles III.
Is Australia still doing that?
Yeah.
They are.
Oh.
They tried not to a few years ago, but they didn't quite get there.
Oh, well.
Did they actually try not to, Thomas?
We had a referendum on the Republic.
It was a referendum.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And yes, it was lost.
We haven't gone that far because we're just lazy and cold. Most of the time.
So, well, cold is a thing that I think we expect to be in the Great Dark.
Ooh,
we are
segue,
gathered here today to discuss the quick start for Coriolis, the Great Dark, which we've all had about a week to peruse. We may not have had quite that long to peruse the updated edition, which came out a few hours ago. But Douglas, you've been through it, so I'm relying on you.
Yeah.
And Mohammed's making his apologies. He can't join. And I have to also send apologies from Millie and Dave, who both have bad heads. Not that they've been drinking together. I urge everybody, stop those rumors now. They're on opposite ends of the country. So
it is a comparatively small place, England, though.
Yeah,
since you've been throwing a bit of shade on colonies, I just will make the point: you can ride across a part of England in a day on a bicycle.
That is true. That is true.
Right,
a very small country.
Yeah.
Really quite minuscule when you consider the amount of the globe it took over in the 19th century.
For me to go home, it's 9 hours. It's a 9-hour drive. And I don't think that you can go like driving the same distance from Cornwall up to the top of Scotland.
Well, no, if I were to drive from Cornwall to Scotland, well, I could take it leisurely and probably do it in 9 hours. But yeah, we're a small
at 140 kilometers an hour. That's what we do.
Well, you know what kilometers are. We have miles in this country. They're much further. But anyway,
there's something
this
on,
is not what we're here to talk
that
about.
says Gage. Yeah, well, there we go. Let's get into it.
Mohammed and Eric are here to get us talking about the Great Dark. And we've been discussing it on our forum as well, but I have been keeping myself kind of mum, apart from pointing out that they've slightly nerfed auto fire, which will upset Dave something rotten because that's his favorite thing.
Yeah.
But first of all, I want to ask each of you first impressions. Shall we start off with you, Thomas?
I really like it. I am not a naysayer on the new game. I completely sympathize and actually agree with a number of points that have been made about the fact it's not really it's not a what do I say? It's not a step from Coriolis Third Horizon. It's actually not. It's a completely different game. The mechanics work quite differently. So it's not an inheritor in that sense of the word. Like it doesn't. It's not second edition Coriolis in any way, shape, or form. But I like what they've done with the rules. I like the thinking they've applied. I think there are a few things, and one comment in particular I'll save for later about the meta currency / mechanics. I think they could have done more, a lot more actually, if I was being upfront. But yeah, no, I like it. I think it'll be fun to play. I think it'll be interesting and good adventurous sort of game. Yeah.
Yeah. And Douglas. What about you?
I really like it. I like it because, again, not because it's a spiritual successor of Coriolis, kind of in any way, but you've got the backstory, you've got the painting of the previous generation, but to me, there's just an evolution in the Year Zero engine, and I like it. It's a full auto. I haven't really experienced it enough to really care. But when
well, I've got to say, I think apart from Dave, everybody is glad about the change in the rules.
okay. I just think that, if you're going to go into this, a kind of Jacques Cousteau, early 19th century, going into the unknown, this is the way to do it. And I like the way that they've integrated the exploration into talents and gear, as opposed to just listing off a bunch of skills.
Mhm.
I really like the idea of insight and perception as being their own thing. And
Mhm.
I don't mind health, hope, and heart. I think that those are absolutely great, and I like that. But I do
Right.
have things that I don't like, and I'll mention those later.
Cool. Okay, so my thoughts are this. First of all, I'm just going to get this out around hope and the actually rather simplistic economy of hope, which is you roll your dice and you spend hope equal to the number of ones you get on that re-roll. So you never know when you're going to run out of hope.
Mhm.
I like that. I especially like it because I invented that. It was one of the early iterations of faith that we had in Tales of the Old West. Dave didn't like it at all. And I must admit, when I play tested it, it seemed to confuse our players more than I expected it to. So there's that. So anyway, that's just get that out of the way. I'm slightly obviously we're not seeing the full rules here, but within the scope of the core game, I'm not necessarily impressed with how you recover hope. It's not as much fun as the hope recovery, for example, in Tales of the sorry, what am I saying? In the One Ring is what I mean. I like that, actually slightly complex, but also very much talking about how the group bond together form of hope recovery. I guess they couldn't nick that wholesale because then people would just accuse them of nicking that wholesale. The thing for me though is, and this might be divulging a bit of a confidential secret, but last year we proposed Tales of the Old West to the gang, and they rejected it. And one of the reasons why they rejected it is because it was too broad. Should have got the email out now, but they said that in confidence. But my impression was they were saying it's not focused enough on one thing. It's one of those do anything ultimate sandbox things, which it is. That's what we've designed it at. And they were saying we're less interested in doing that. And obviously what this is very tightly focused on one thing, whereas Coriolis, the Third Horizon, was very much the ultimate sandbox. And within the 36 systems of the old Horizon, Third Horizon. And in fact, I remember, when we were raving about it in the early days of our podcast, when it was called Coriolis Event, I heard two complaints about it, or two reasons why people didn't want to play it. One of which was they said it's like many other space games. There's both too much to do and not enough to do, in that space games don't particularly tell you what they're about. And they kind of say you can do anything, and you end up hopping from planet to planet, doing a bit of trading, a bit of crime, moving on when the heat gets too hot. But the other thing they said was, and there's too much lore. There's way too much And there is, there is effectively roughly 20 years of Swedish world building going on in there. And it was all there. I mean, I felt particularly every paragraph you read was, what would you say? Kind of a story hook. Every single paragraph you read was a storybook, almost every sentence. So there's almost too much possibility. And I think it was really hard. And I think some of the things they did, like the group concept and stuff like that, was trying to help a GM navigate their way through it. But this has taken the opposite tack. This is one game doing one thing. And at the moment, because we've only got the quick start, we don't know how much beyond that one thing it will expand. But I get the impression from the language they're not going to do that very often. But sorry, this is me. I'm hogging it now. This is what you get because I repressed everything I was going to say.
You're replacing Dave. You're just adding Dave's time.
I think I wonder whether they're planning on doing more Coriolis games at kind of regular multi-annual frequencies, that they will expand the Coriolis brand to feature different things in future games, because this is a brand they own. And maybe they don't want to, maybe we'll have a few campaigns in the Great Dark and then we'll be moving on, or, back to the first Horizon or whatever. I honestly don't know, but whether they're going to give us the lore in bite-sized pieces with new releases, a little bit like they did with Mutant Year Zero, where, first of all, you're mutants, and then you could be animals in Gen Lab Alpha, then you could be robots and unmutated humans and stuff like that. I just wonder whether that's the kind of model that they're aiming for.
I doubt it, to be transparent. I think giving away the community license, and it is a giving away. I mean, they're being very generous. It's not a criticism, but it's also saying do whatever you want. It would be very hard to come over the top of that with another game set in the Third Horizon, for instance, because all these people would have bought all this community content, invested all of this energy and time in building it out. And then coming in as a, and then sort of saying, oh, well, that's all well and good, but here's the real version of that. And actually, there was that comment in Besson a couple of weeks ago about, oh, but where's the real supplement? That was commented on, so, which I will not take personally.
Well, I mean, what it's really saying is, why don't Free League publish your Japan book?
Why don't they?
Why
it's
don't
probably
they?
Not quite at the standard that they would expect, and I would completely respect that. Look, I think it'll be really fascinating to see what they do with this, because I actually genuinely wonder about that delve. I also wonder whether the mystery will be quite. So you said there's lots of lore in Coriolis, but it's all a bit sort of fragile.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it's not certain, right? Like, and a really good example is that I hold a really different opinion from reading Coriolis on what icons are to Dave. A fundamentally different opinion, like so completely different. It's not funny.
So can you remind us of that, please?
Just so Dave can rant later.
Just so Dave can rant in the comments.
In the comments, yeah, no.
Later.
So I don't think the icons are real. My fundamental premise for Coriolis: The Third Horizon is icons are not real things. They are a manifestation. Yeah, whatever. Nice cards. Nice cards. They are a manifestation of people's faith, for sure, and how that influences the universe. But I don't think the icons have agency. I don't think they have desires, wants, or dreams. And the reason I think that, in part, is because the beast is explicitly referenced as the emperor of Alada. So they're either that or that. They're not both, right? Like, so they're the faith. They're the faith of people in these things that they've then turned into these gods. Anyway, Dave has a completely different opinion. But the point I'm trying to make in reality is both of us can have read the lore and come to that conclusion completely justifiably.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's nothing in that law that says I'm wrong or he's right, or he's right and I'm wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like, sorry, I got that. Anyway, you know what I mean?
Your third
So
horizon
whilst there's
may
a lot of
vary.
lore, it's ambiguous. I wonder whether this game is going to have that same level of ambiguity. So the builders are actually going to be like fundamentally the mystery of the game, but the sense I get is they're also going to be much more known. Like we've already got references in the quick start to the fact that this place was built by the builders and they did these things in this place. That's inherently less mysterious, right? And when you delve and when these campaigns come out, will there be much more certainty about those things? And I wonder whether that'll be a very different vibe. I think that'll be a really aesthetically different vibe for different groups. Anyway, there you go. My thought.
That's a good point. And I think you're right. For me, when I say every paragraph has a plot hook, every paragraph can be taken almost a different way. And what I loved about almost everything they discussed is they inherent within the nature of the thing they were describing were conflicting and opposite interpretations of it, even within the text. So, they particularly with the icon, so would be, this icon is absolutely this person and also absolutely this person. So that's what I really enjoyed. But I do think a lot of people were slightly put off by that breadth of knowledge, and also that thing that's touching on Versen. Obviously, your Japanese Versen aren't real Versen because they're not published by Free League. And I do remember there's an enormous reluctance to say, "Oh, I've got this brilliant idea, but I don't want to get my players into it in case a book comes out from the guys at Free League that contradicts it." And I'm thinking, well, they're not going to read book, and you're probably going to be telling it to them, and I bet you can bend whatever they say in that future book and they're not even going to remember what they did in your campaign a year ago. So you can tell them that what they did in their campaign fits perfectly with whatever they're published now in the book.
Look at Tales of the Old West and your old idea.
Yeah. And they're using my old idea. That's great. And I have to be, having now said that we sent Tales of the Old West to them, I don't think the version of Tales of the Old West we sent to them had that version of Fate in it. So I'm not saying they have nicked the idea from us, but I'd like to think they have in my heart of hearts. They probably haven't though, but it was good to see because it's a good idea, whatever Dave says.
So one of the things about the channel that I think everybody who listens to the podcast knows that at the end, and may the icons bless you. And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to look this up. And in the beginning of the book on page 8, it says, praying to the icons. Icon worship is ever present in the third horizon, though through faith, the people find strength, and so will you. When darkness surrounds you and all hope seems lost, a desperate prayer to the icons can be what saves your lives. And I think that fulfills both Dave's view of the icons and Thomas's view of the
yours,
icons.
Thomas. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the question for me is Coriolis lesser because they haven't even addressed the icons? The Coriolites, they may be able to carry something onto it, but if you look at human history, 200 years is what they were talking about with Eleanor, I believe, on their podcast.
In terms of the gap between...
In terms of the gap.
The last time, yeah.
Which I was thinking millennium, but anyway, 200 years. I'm sorry, but 200 years is not long enough to completely and totally leave your religion behind without having some type of either evolution or change in attitude. I mean, just think about the pilgrims coming across in the 17th century and coming off to America. It wasn't the same, but it was similar enough. And I find that if there's anything that I dislike about this is that the chapels in the ship, the importance of this hope has completely and totally changed mechanically and also narratively. And I'm wondering what they're going to do. Does it bother you at all?
I think in this quick start, no. I mean, because this isn't everything. So there may be more reference in the core book, but also the icons were part of the core mechanic of Coriolis, and they're not part of the core mechanic of Coriolis. So as I always remember Tony, Dave's brother, saying when we were first playing, and in fact he was our first player in the Hammam in one very early episode, and he said, well, obviously the icons are real because when you pray to them, good things happen. So he was a firm believer. Well, now when you pray to them, no, you lose hope. That's what happens. You may still get your thing, but you lose your hope. So yeah, I think probably the Great Dark doesn't have the icons. I'm convinced the Coriolites will be on a campaign to bring the icons into the dark. What is missing from the Great Dark is the icons, and they will bring the shining light of the icons in there. That's in my campaign, whatever it says in the book anyway. They will be there. But just brings you on to another point. Here's the thing I don't particularly like about the quick start, and that is slightly bad editing. And case in point is the Coriolites. So we get the guilds and other factions on this is on page 9. And we talk about the Navigators Guild, the Machinist Guild, the Gardeners Guild, who are the 3 main guilds that we're going to be dealing with in this game. And obviously, as a sop to us old hands, the Coriolites get their mention there. One single paragraph when everybody else gets 2, but it's there. Then you turn the page, and there's a little box out called Lesser Players.
Yes.
And what is mentioned among the lesser players? Well, they talk about the bloody Coriolites again, don't they?
Yes, they do.
So, I mean, strikes me that, one of those references should have gone.
And why? I mean, I have this written in the side because I went through it with fine-tooth comb. Why are they opposed to the whole project of Ship City itself? To what end?
Are they? I thought that was the Wreckers.
No, the evidence points to the members of the Coriolite clans, and it seems centered around an opposition to the whole project.
Yeah.
So I'm that might be a way. It may be religious fervor or whatever. I think the pariah mentioned, but I forget where. And then you've got the Black Toad. I think there's enough political.
And I'm just going to quickly correct myself now for all the people complaining about it. Is I said 1 paragraph. Actually, there are 3 paragraphs because, of course, it goes over the page. The box out gets in the way, but there are 3 paragraphs on the Coriolites. So I'm sorry for my misjudged. Anyway, carry on, Doug.
Well, I don't know, Thomas. Do you think that there's? I get the feeling that there's a lot of potential for lore just given these 2 pages.
I do, and I think the quick start, because it's a quick start, doesn't talk at all really about what's happening on the ship city or the great ship that you're traveling on. And I'm trusting that because the delve mechanic by itself isn't enough to generate a campaign.
No.
Right? There's just not enough there. Even if you had a whole bunch of delves, it'd get pretty ordinary. You're just doing dungeon bashing.
Yeah.
That sounds unkind, but that's what it would be. So I am trusting that in line with, The Walking Dead and Mutants and some of the other games, that there's this vibrant community with these guilds smashing up against each other that you participate in as well. That is what gives the narrative energy to the game and to your characters, trajectory. Because it's really fascinating to be an explorer and go and find out the great mysteries, but you would assert, or I would assert, that you need other dimensions of play to make the game usable as a campaign. And those dimensions would in my mind, be things like the conflict between the factions.
Mm.
So there's clearly political,
Mm.
and political and resource-driven conflict between the major guilds. And then I suspect the Coriolites represent the sort of funny story. I wonder if they've been put there just as a bit of a dig as well. For the old grognards who want to go back to Coriolis and play 3rd edition. I mean that in the kindest possible way. But they
pretty much admitted
rejection,
that when I challenged them
Yeah.
on that issue in their first interview.
but their rejection, or the Coriolites' rejection of particularly of the Great City, I suspect is a rejection of the idea that we should stay here at all. That we arrived, it's this horrible place, nothing really works. We should have invested our energy and time in getting our ship back together and heading back home where, lands of plentiful goodness exist. It's the blessed land. Like, the blessed land is just over there, and we know it's there because we used to be there. So why are we not going back? Why are we wasting all of our energy and time cludging together this great city? Anyway, I have no idea if this is correct or not, but it would be fascinating to have the Coriolites be literally, we should terminate this whole venture. It's a terrible idea. The blight is everywhere. We should head home. Why are you people not getting it?
Yeah.
And really challenging that. Anyway, it's a thought.
Yeah,
but yes, I'm trusting there'll be more in the city and the ships.
I think that they've set it up. I mean, as I was reading the beginning of it, there were a whole bunch of, as I was reading, you could read through the levels, and I was thinking of Coriolis because of the levels. I mean, it really was almost a parallel with going into the depths of this ship. Yeah, into the basement. But it's a dying city, as it says on page 6. That this is a city that needs resources to continue, and your purpose is to find those resources. I agree 100% with Thomas that you cannot sustain a game, or from not just from a campaign perspective or from a play perspective, but from a marketing perspective. You cannot sustain this without changing it up and including many more dimensions. And I think that they've got broad strokes at the moment, and that's going to have to be fleshed out. I believe that from what Costa and Niels said, I believe on the first interview, possibly, I think it was with Eleanor, that there's going to be in the campaign, it's a box set. You're going to get your campaign. Everything's going to be there. And that they wanted to focus more on the politics and take out the mechanics that stood in the way of gameplay to bring the mechanic to bring the story more alive by focusing more on the world. And I thought about that, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. I think that they've got it in a bit with the talents and the gear, but you're going to have more box sets, and maybe that's like Alien had box sets.
Yeah,
and also Blade Runner.
Yeah,
I think Alien and Blade Runner
have
shown them the way forward at Ship Free League. I think there's probably a great deal of enthusiasm for box sets as opposed to a simple campaign supplement in terms of sales. And probably there's more profit in there because I know when I'm seeing things at when I'm representing Free League, it's an easier sell to sell a box set because there's a bunch of stuff in there. It feels like great value. It may feel like great value while actually being slightly cheaper to produce than a hardback book. But I don't know. Anyway, Ron, I just put Ron's comment up here. He says Mariah can easily be a full campaign, so why can't Delving? I think both of you have answered that in different ways, but also I want to add my thought, which is I'm reading The Terror at the moment, which is meant to be one of the inspirations of the new game, and I've just read quite a lot of sex, because even though they're stuck out in the Arctic trying to find the North Wave Passage and haven't seen anybody for 2 years, they're remembering an awful lot of sex right now in these last couple of chapters that I've been reading. And of course, a lot of that, actually, one of those sex scenes, which is in Tasmania, in a platypus pond. Thomas, I'm pointing at you here like you live so close to Tasmania.
Well, I'm closer than I normally am. I'm in Melbourne, so I'm close to...
and the politics of the governorship of Van Diemen's Land, as they're calling it, of course, back then, is all exploding around them, and the young lady concerned is the niece of the soon-to-be exiled governor, and so there is that politics there, even in a book that is ostensibly about a bunch of people freezing to death in the Northwest Passage, or Northwest not Passage, because they're stuck in the ice. So yeah, I mean that does bring in that politics, and I'd like to think we can see some of that politics there. Against that, I did ask whether there'd be an opportunity to have a say in the building of your great ship and how that develops, and they didn't particularly point that way, but maybe a future campaign might do that, build that aspect out, as you were saying, Douglas.
If you look at their history of their quick start releases and their just basic bare bones, this is to attract you. The words are already there. I would say that almost everything is going to be included in the book. And so when I look at the 50 pages that they've devoted so far, they're going to flesh that out in other areas. I don't think they haven't just put this out and then said, oh, we're going to rewrite everything. So how big is this book going to be? With, I think with Coriolis, it came into well over 300 pages. It was a big book. And lately they've been trying to get to about 200. And so how much room do they have? Let's say they throw an adventure in there. Maybe it's all going to be rules, but we're talking about 3/4 of a 200-page book that's yet to be uncovered. And that is leaving me more excited.
Yeah.
Because the possibilities. And I think that one of the great things about today was they released this version 1.1, and they've addressed the concerns that the community was stating. The physical crit table is too deadly. Change it, please. And so they've added 5 different rows to kind of mitigate that. And so they're listening to the blocking and the dodging rules just to clarify things. That might bode well for the future.
Yeah. Yes. Although I'm kind of less impressed by that. I like to think that I give the fans what I want to play. That I don't change things when the fans necessarily say they don't particularly like a rule. I'd always say give it a go. But shall we talk a bit about mechanics?
Yeah.
Likes and dislikes in the new mechanics.
Likes are, it's all much simpler than Coriolis. I think they've actually tried very hard to remove a lot of it. And in Autofire, let's talk about Autofire, because I have a player who, just like Dave, has built their character in such a way that I have every talent that makes me better at Autofire. They were a group of assassins working for Alarm's Temple, so there was a defensible argument for at least one of us should be good at Autofire.
Well, except how many assassins do you see going?
Well,
it's a single shot, mate.
I'm just saying,
it's a knife in the dark.
They don't have to be good. They don't have to be good
Assassins.
assassins.
No, they've got the stealthy ones who creep around and kill people. This is the one member of the assassin team who solves it when they run into the pariah, and it's like, oh, I don't think my garrote's going to work on that power armor. What should we do now? The anti-pariah member of the team. What I was going to say is I think it's reflective of an intent to simplify actually most of the combat. And just make it a little bit easier. It also moves a little bit away from being so combat heavy. So I think having the concept of blight, having the concept of hope, and having the concept of health is an explicit decision that the real danger in this game is much more diverse. The danger of the game is much more diverse, right? So you had those mental health points in Coriolis. I'm struggling to remember what they were called. I think they were just called MPs or something like that.
Mind points, I think. Yeah.
Mind points. They were barely used, right? Let's be pretty direct. They were barely used.
No, absolutely.
The game revolved around health and damage and armor and weapons. I think they've made a deliberate decision to move away from that to make this in line with their intent, much more about horror and exploration and all of those sorts of things. So I like that a lot. I actually don't. I'm with Doug. I like the 6 stats. I think it's fine. I think having skills and talents basically be the same thing, which is what they've really done. And then mechanically, we haven't seen the full rules, but the suggestion is mechanically a lot of them, or at least some of them, will have rankings that you will buy, which I think inherits from Twilight 2000, in that you can buy upgrades on talents. Also builds on good old Forbidden Lands with its ranking of talents as well. So I think mechanically that makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's any big deal with not having skills pulled out and talents pulled out. I think that's good. I like a lot. I do have probably the same niggle that you both sort of hinted at with Hope, which is I think it's actually just a meta currency. So my problem with Hope is it's just the meta currency. It doesn't have any grander vision attached to it. And this is actually where I think this is the thing I think they got wrong with it in comparison to Coriolis, or this is the thing they didn't carry forward from Coriolis. I'm not saying they had to keep prayer and, but they haven't embedded the sort of core mechanic around hope in any way in the broader concept of the game that I can see. Now, in the extended version of the rules, that might be completely different. There might be a whole bunch of stuff I can't see right now. Maybe, doing great things for your ship gives you an automatic boost to hope, and it's all suddenly getting mechanically improved. But right now, it feels a bit sort of, I tick boxes, I cross boxes, which is a bit sad, actually, because, that's a loss.
Speaking of the tick boxes, I think I'm worried about bean counting when it comes to your supplies. I'm really worried about that. I'm looking at the 2 character sheets, and the Coriolis character sheet. Well, you've got radiation, you've got experience, you've got those dots, you've got you've got your mind points and you've got your hit points. And pretty much they've done the same thing. They've added together 2 stats. Here they've added 3. Whatever. But hope, the icons, again, coming back to that, is, for me, as a player and as a GM, the whole icon system was about when you go out into the dark, whether you actually believe or whether you don't, whether they're real or whether they aren't, you are so desperate that something has to give you hope, and you have to lament and pray and maybe whatever, maybe it's an internal thing that happens, maybe it's something that's effectual that happens. Either way, it gives you a mechanical boost that is narratively placed. In this regard, I don't think that they're selling hope that well. Blight, I think that they put all their eggs in the basket of the bird.
Yeah. Is that a bad thing, though?
No, I think I like the bird. I think that having this group, almost crew bird, is nice. Obviously, they've played Wingspan too much. And they love this. They think this is awesome. And I think that it's awesome. But you've left the other stuff kind of, I don't know. But I love the attributes. Looking at the gear, it's amazing. We already know that with your talents, you're going to start off with 2 dice for one dice for the others. I think they've already said that you get a maximum of 3 dice as you level up. Also, it's quite easy to figure out that all the attributes come out to 24 points. So you've got 24 points to spend. It's quite easy.
Yeah. So I'm undecided on mechanics. I do think Hope isn't as well integrated into the feeling of the game as any of the other push mechanics that we've ever experienced. And I do think for something that's actually quite similar to Faith in Toto, I think we've done a better job of integrating Faith, which is effectively just a meta currency, into the genre and the tropes of the game, of our setting. The thing I quite like, so supply, I'm willing to give them something on, because again, I am reading, if you've not heard me say it yet, I'm reading the Terror. And there's an awful lot of, we got to get 5 tons of food to the cache, before the summer happens or the winter or whatever. So that idea of leaving supply in base camp and coming to it, and potentially, I guess there's that thing of leaving. I have not read the adventure, by the way, just in case I get to play it with somebody else.
No.
Same.
But I believe there'd be that concept of, let's leave some supply here for our way back, and then of course we don't come back this way, so that's gone. So that's interesting. Blight as well. I'm kind of feeling in the Terror, half their tinned food hasn't been sealed properly, and so that's all gone off. So I'm kind of waiting to test the mechanics, and I think I'll only really get a handle on them once they're in play. I just want to maybe just finish on one thing that I've heard a lot of people said. And Mohammed, you're here, so I want to ask your opinion as well. Mohammed's in the chat. A lot of people have said, they've got rid of the whole Arabian Nights in Space feel. And I have 2 points that I want to ask about that. How Arabian Nights in Space was the original game, actually? And a lot of what I really liked the fact that it was a non-Western culture, that it wasn't simply based on the assumption that white men get to the stars and kind of carry on an Anglic, shall we say, culture in space. I like the fact it wasn't that. I love all the names. I love the fact that there's derivations of Byzantine and Arabic words that are used as though that they're written into the society. I am still seeing those Arabic words in this game, but what else made it? I don't want to think that it was simply the idea that icon worship, or shall we say, the concept of worship was specifically the thing that made it feel Middle Eastern. I don't want to be so reductionist about Middle Eastern culture that you define Middle Eastern culture by the fact that they're quite devout. And therefore, given the Third Horizon was quite devout, that's what made it Middle Eastern. Particularly when it's Arabian Nights in space.
It's because you've got a ship, and Arabian Nights is you're going on a ship. Why not? You can't just get a red cover on a book, put some Chinese or Japanese names, put some Oriental motifs on it, and call it Oriental. And I thought that Coriolis had that feeling. I hope that it wasn't just the motif of, oh, I think of Arabia, or I think of the Middle East, or I think of Islam, and I'm thinking worship. That's the only thing that they do. And if you're going to do something like that, don't put it up with a bunch of icons, because that's actually not very Islamic. And so I liked the idea in Coriolis, the Third Horizon, of the adventure mindset, and I guess the vastness of the Dark Between the Stars. I'm not too sure if I feel anything. It's really, I just feel more like Jules Verne, and if anything, it's not a not very environmentally friendly game, as they leave all their crap in one area with all their oxygen tanks and everything, and then they move off to another area so that someone else 2,000 years later can find their crap and take it and say, look at the wonderful things we found in the ice.
It's funny. It's interesting though, because I mean, if you like, all the media about people climbing Everest now is all about all the rubbish they leave behind. And actually, I suspect that's explicitly where they've gotten that idea from, right? Because it's literally the reference that you hear whenever you hear people talking about, oh, I climbed Everest, and there were dead bodies, there were air tanks, there was plastic rubbish. You know, now there's this kind of desperate attempt to clean it up once a year or something like that. So it's very similar. Muhammad has answered your question, which is to say, yeah, not so much really.
And I'm assuming, Mohammed, you're talking about original Third Horizon Coriolis when you're saying not that Middle Eastern, hey? Because I haven't seen any reference to jinn in the new book.
No, but they have mentioned, they did mention that they would be coming with jinn and monsters. What can you do? I mean, sell yourself big is what I'm thinking. Is don't hold back in your quick start. Really sell it. And I'm not sure if they've really sold it. Sorry, Thomas.
No, that's fine. It's good. I think, look, I don't think it matters as a radical perspective to hold, in the sense that it's exactly true. Every game is gonna be a kludge together of cultures, and people are gonna make attempts to make things work. I actually think, for instance, icons has a lot more to do with what was happening to the Byzantines through that period, because let's face it, icon worship as actually a thing in Byzantine culture for at least 200, 300, 400 years. They fought civil wars over it. That's how seriously they took icon worship. You know, the idea that you were, you know, was there the, you know, could you draw a picture of something, was that allowed? You know, actually broke empire at least twice that I can remember. So
iconoclasts.
Yeah. Where did the word come from? Oh, it turns out it comes.
Yeah, it turns out it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. So I think the new game is we haven't really, we've spent a lot of time talking about what we don't like. I think we should talk about what we really like. And what I really like is they've actually been ambitious in creating the new game. They've said, you know what, we want to tell this very different story where these people have crossed this sort of massive gulf in space and time in a real sense, because, you know, 200 years, and they're desperate for survival. What would that look like? What would you sacrifice? What would your culture look like to where you're living on the edge of existence? And I think they've had a really solid crack at that. And I think they've really, and I think to be kind to what they were intending, and to let go of our desperate desire to play the Third Horizon again, what they've actually done is set up a game that is all about survival on the edge. You're alone in the universe, And it's not necessarily a nihilistic game in the same way that, say, Death in Space or even Mothership is,
No.
which are two thematically related games. Very thematically related, and that comment's been made by lots of people. It's a game of these people working together to try and survive on the edge of existence, taking all these risks because they have no choice. And that's the narrative drive and the narrative engine that I see in the middle of the game. And I think it's fantastic. And I think a game where hope is the mechanic as opposed to despair, because you could argue in both Mothership, and I'll pick on them, and Death in Space, the mechanic's more about despair than it is about hope.
Yeah.
Whereas this is a game that is about saying, no, in this darkness, in this loneliness in space, as the only people we know, we will push to survive. We will take those risks. We will do those things. And I think that's actually kind of cool. And I like the interpretation of it as a bit more of a hopeful game, despite obviously all the settings, which are terrible. There's blight, there's, going to be horrible things from the darkness. So yeah, I think that's what I like about it. And I would let go of the cultural connection and say, no, this is what happens when people are surviving at the edge. They sacrifice so much to survive.
Yes.
They sacrifice all these other things to be alive. And this is really asking the question, what has this culture gotten rid of or removed because it's simply tangential? And maybe the Coriolites are kind of the villains in this story, because they're holding on to this sort of, this facile or even illusory view of the universe that's just not real.
Well,
right? And undermining this attempt to survive to make this thing. I think that could be a really great way to play it out, right? Like, are the Coriolites kind of the secret villains?
Yeah,
the Wreckers are there, but who funds the Wreckers?
They talk about the nest, which I think is really, really nice, because the nest is part of, Kua, and it's part of the majestic glory. They've taken parts, they've made this little kind of almost like an icon in itself of the past, and they're looking to the past for all the answers instead of looking forward, where there's always going to be naysayers in society no matter what. And the whole endeavor of Coriolis is to move forward and to say, we will make it, and we're going to make it. I plan on playing the character Massima if Raldanash lets me play this character. And I just want to read you the kind of summary of what this character is about. Born to a minor Coriolite family, you were destined for dusty archives. However, curiosity got the better of you, and you were ousted as a juvenile after an explosive equipment in the inner sanctum went spectacularly wrong. Freed from the shackles of expectation. So that's the Coriolis endeavor, right? You have these expectations. You explore the underside of the ship's city and found friends in unlikely places. Now you hack, cut, and burn your way through the ruins. And what are you? You are essentially a demolitions expert. You've got, you're a driver, you're a mechanic, you're a welder. I mean, there's something that a person can connect to immediately with this, that being a welder is an important thing. You need to be this welder. And I love the concepts that they've got with the characters. They're identifiable. And to tie back with what Matt was saying, that living on the edge is a harsh reality. And you're going to dream of the past. And you're going to think of what it's like. But at the moment, you don't have the luxury of thinking about anything other than survival. And I think that they've captured that. So I'm really excited.
Cool. And I think that's where we have to bring this discussion to its end. So I think that's an up note. Well done, Thomas, for remembering and reminding us to think about what we like in here. Thank you very much, Thomas and Doug, for joining in. And apologies again from Dave and Millie, who were going to join us, but are feeling a bit crook. And thanks as well to all our listeners live on YouTube, Mohammed, Bruce, Jonathan, and Eric, and even more people that I can't remember. Yeah, we'll be recording. This will be the bulk of the content of the next podcast. So those of you in this little group here, you don't really need to listen to it, particularly if you don't like your voice. But shall we just say goodbye to our listeners now?
Goodbye.
And may the icons bless you.
Well done, Douglas.
And also, did you notice?
No, you're pointing over here. Oh, I see.
It's your thing. It's your
Excellent
dice thing.
Yeah,
very
cool.
nice.
And I will.
Yes,
I'll say this as a free advert now. I have just told all our stationary patrons, our silver level patrons who fund the game, who also contribute towards the game, that if they just send me their address, I will send them one of these dice mats as well. Not just for you privileged patrons anymore, Doug. So anyway, thanks very much, everybody, and we will see you in the next stream, whenever that is.
Say.